And now, because these dinners really are always supposed to be fun parties and give you a few moments of interesting change of pace, we have devised a game that we started last year. We're continuing it this year. I don't know how long we can do it because it gets a little longer each time, but we have had previous distinguished guests. And partly because I am essentially a lazy man, I have decided that the easiest way to get through the pleasant chore of making sure that you know everybody at the head table, which I'm quite sure is unnecessary because you know all these people very well, and I am going to introduce the one perhaps who needs the least introduction beside Dan, so that he can start this domino trick of introducing the one who followed him as our guest of honor, and so on until we get back to Dan. And so it's my pleasure to present to you right now, if you'll stop putting those words down, the very distinguished founder, leader, and idol of the John Birch Society, Mr. Robert Welch.
Reverend Poling and Father Fenham, Colonel Bunker, my other good friends up here on the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get started, I want to make the 2 or 3 comments that came to mind that I was scribbling down and got censured for by Colonel Bunker while this was going on. I'd like to solve your worry about one thing. Dan's going to take that cake back to Texas on his bicycle. I mean, you should know that. The second is, thank goodness, John Rarick gave Dan a pen for a present, because I can assure you he didn't own one before and really needed it because he's had to borrow mine all evening just to sign his autographs. So that was a very smart present. Now, so far as my introducing the next domino, that's a good name for you, Tom. I never thought of calling you a domino before. So far as introducing my introducing the next domino, Tom Anderson, is concerned, that would be very unwise. I know too much about him. Just to outline his good qualities alone would take me at least an hour. But as you know, we must always present both sides. You've heard that all your time. And to tell you about his bad qualities, I might need the whole evening. So I'm going to upset Colonel Bunker's row of dominoes by confining my remarks primarily to our guest of honor for the evening. Actually, this turned out to be a very profitable decision. Dan Smoot offered me $5 to say some good things about him, and Tom Anderson then offered me $10 not to say any bad things about him. Now, if you could have enough of these parties, I might be able to let my wife start eating again. As it is, I feel terribly sorry for her having to sit and watch me eat my steaks when I can't afford any for her. But let's get on with the business. For it is very seldom that anybody, and especially an anti-communist, receives 2 such tributes in 1 week as have just come to Dan Smoot. The first one is in the current issue of National Review, which some of you may already have seen. About half a column of Mr. Buckley's personal pages, signed with the initials WFB, is devoted to an extremely vicious excoriation of our friend Dan Smoot. After several other interesting and revealing remarks, revealing that is, about their author, Mr. Buckley more or less summarizes his indictment by saying that Dan Smoot is one of those creeps who is writing for the fever swamps. And ladies and gentlemen, if you residents of the intellectual fever swamps, I assume that's all we've got here, if you do not realize what a high honor it is for any patriotic American to be called a creep by Bill Buckley, then it's because you've not been sitting where I have for the past many years. So welcome to the club, Dan, and congratulations on your increasing fame. As to the second honor to come Dan's way, so fast on the heels of the other one, I have, as usual, put my remarks concerning the purpose of this dinner into some poetry, of which both Shakespeare and Milton would be very jealous. At least ever since I wrote it, I've heard them turning over in their graves. So I am now going to confer on you lucky people the world premiere of the very first reading of that poetry. Now, when I finish reading it, and it only lasts about 3/4 of an hour, it isn't very long. When I finish reading it, I shall sit down at once to escape the eggs and tomatoes. So I want you to consider, to realize that Tom Anderson should be thought of as being already introduced. So I can sit down and leave it that way. And the only thing that I would like to add to all you know about him now is, I do want to bring this in, since I will not say any more after I finish this great piece of poetry, as you'll see, is that this is news and serious. We're very proud of it. Tom Anderson has just agreed to become the national chairman of our National Motor Read Committee, which we are very proud of. Now to go back and do Ed Griffin all over in verse. A handsome young man by the name of Dan Smoot. Waistline's right anyway, from what I've heard. A handsome young man by the name of Dan Smoot, we gather tonight from afar to salute. We come from Atlanta and Phoenix and Butte, from every big city and every grass root, by train and by plane and perhaps parachute, from east and from west and by every known route. The general, the captain, the newest recruit, the business tycoon and the peddler of fruit, and pilots and lawyers and bankers sans doute, and even professors like E. Merrill Root. So break out your trumpet and tune up your flute, and find you a tutor who'll teach you to toot. Go strike up the band and break out the lute for presents befitting and honors to suit. Pour out the champagne and let nothing dilute the pleasure we feel, nor the occasion pollute. The state of the world? Why, we don't give a hoot. For tonight, anyway, let the question be moot. Our hero is gallant and brave and astute, an orator, author, and scholar to boot, a man we can count on with trust absolute, a warrior bold and wise. Here's to Dan Smoot.